Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of Tech Can Save Us podcast brought to you by Literal Humans. As always, I'm your host, Paul David, CEO of Literal Humans. And I'm joined today by Michael Howard, founder and CEO of Nichefire. And we're going to talk about cultural listening for brands, which is a topic near and dear to our hearts as a marketing and branding agency. Something that's really important. But first of all, welcome to the pod, Michael.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
First things first, by way of introduction, Fire is an AI-powered cultural intelligence platform that helps businesses identify and predict emerging cultural trends across social media, search engines, and other online sources. Michael's a leading expert in predictive analytics and cultural insights with over a decade of experience in driving brand growth. He founded Nichefire in 2017, developing an AI-powered platform that uncovers cultural trends in online communities before they hit the mainstream. I can't wait to dig into this. It's very exciting for me as a marketer. Nichefire recently announced a $2.6 million funding round with investors, including Rev1 Ventures, Alos Ventures, and Keyhorse Capital. Some impressive names there. The company works with major brands like Walmart, Kraft Heinz, Nestle, who use the platform to uncover emerging trends, drive innovation, and protect their reputations in a rapidly evolving cultural landscape. Welcome to the pod, Michael. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Let's jump in and kind of, set the landscape for our listeners and then talk about this idea of cultural intelligence. It's probably a phrase a lot of our listeners haven't heard before. What exactly is it, and why is it becoming so critical for businesses today?
Yeah. Well, at least the way we like to approach it, and we like to kind of refer to ourselves as like a cultural listening solution. So what this is essentially like the proactive analysis of conversations, trends, and behaviors to identify those cultural moments and to help understand that broader tone of culture. So the objective here is to filter out all that noise and really focus on those relevant cultural shifts and those relevant insights, for brands to help make sense of that online discourse and really shape strategies that will resonate authentically. And so that's kind of like what our objective here with cultural intelligence and cultural listening.
I love that. And it seems like, the need is so critical, right, for
Mhm.
brands. Help us understand like how this idea of social listening has evolved from just basic monitoring to kind of predictive cultural intelligence that helps, folks engage with their audiences more proactively.
Yeah, it's been a pretty fascinating evolution. In a lot of the early days and whatnot, social listening was all about monitoring brand mentions, tracking that, and tracking consumer sentiment around brands and that sort of thing. And brands would essentially just count how many times they were mentioned online, or see whether people felt positively or negatively about them. And that's still like a really prominent use case and like a major use case, but it was all very reactive. And so you'd find out what happened after the fact and then decide how to respond. But as consumer behavior got more complex and conversations start spreading across many different platforms, brands needed more than just those numbers, those counts, and that sort of thing. And so we started seeing social listening tools start to evolve, start to include things like, topic analysis, tracking influencers, doing more deeper sentiment analysis, and this helped brands really understand not just what people were saying, but why were they saying it. It gave more context. There's still mostly looking backwards, though. And so what we're seeing now is, a shift more towards, like I mentioned before, like that cultural listening. There's a lot of advancements in AI and machine learning, and it's no longer just about monitoring the conversations. It's about forecasting the trends and predicting that consumer behavior before they come mainstream. And so platforms like what we build at Nichefire, we're trying to take that even further by analyzing data, from all over the web, not just social media, but also looking at like search traffic, news, web traffic, podcasts, you name it, to really help us understand, how cultural shifts are forming in real time, and helping them helping brands especially proactively shape strategies, shape products and whatnot, rather than just react. And so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Would love to dig into those cultural shifts because it just feels to me, maybe I'm like an older millennial, but it feels to me that like the cultural shifts are happening faster and faster, and it's
Oh
like
yeah.
harder to keep track of. I'm not on TikTok, I'm not on any of the platforms, but like what kinds of cultural shifts? You give a couple examples. Have you seen businesses maybe traditionally miss out on that your technology has helped them capture?
hmm that's a really great question. So traditionally, businesses have missed these shifts because they were looking in that rearview mirror, you know. So tracking what's already happened rather than like thinking about what's going to be coming next. So a big example is micro trends that start in niche online communities and then they grow into big mainstream movements, or even from various geographies. And think about how K-pop became so popular in the United States, but it originated in Korea, right? But these shifts often happen under the radar, especially when they're brewing in unexpected places. Especially like TikTok and those TikTok subcultures, there's niche forums and whatnot that are really starting to spread this. But another missed area though is that cross-cultural adaptation of trends. So I mentioned K-pop, for instance. Went from a regional phenomena to kind of like a global cultural force. And so brands that weren't tracking that cultural migration early on missed out on significant opportunities to connect with new audiences. And so one of the things we're trying to do is use technology like Nichefire to help capture these kinds of shifts by really analyzing data from again from all across the web, right? Identifying those patterns and how those trends spread from region to region, of demographic to demographic. Then there are also the more behavioral shifts that you see, like social and political changes. And so, for instance, when that conversation around sustainability exploded, many brands didn't see how quickly it would influence consumer choices. They're not just in fashion or food, but finance and tech as well. And so, having like our platform's ability to be able to forecast these shifts, it's really helping brands align their strategies ahead of the time rather than playing that catch up. And so it's all about identifying those small signals early on and understanding how they're going to cascade into those larger movements. And so that's again that's how like cultural listening and that sort of predictive capability is going to be really important for brands going forward, so that way they're not going to miss those opportunities.
Really interesting. I mean, one thing I've always said, is that AI in many ways makes us more human, or allows us to be more human. So I'd be curious, how does AI fundamentally change the way we understand cultural movements compared to traditional market research? And you kind of get at it in terms of like the analysis of the data and the predictive nature that you can sort of glean out of it. So yeah, talk to me about the AI angle.
Yeah, I mean, what hasn't it changed, quite frankly? So traditional market research it can be quite slow and retrospective. It's very valuable and very qualitative, but you're often looking at data that's already a few months old. Whether it's from focus groups, surveys, historical reports, this is really good for analyzing that long-term consumer behavior, but it struggles to capture the cultural movements that they happen. So AI completely flips that model on its head. So instead of waiting for insights to come in, platforms like Nichefire, shameless plug on Nichefire, but there's a lot of social listening and AI-driven analytics platforms and whatnot that are always on, constantly scanning conversations, finding signals, predicting where things are headed. But the real game changer is that AI doesn't just, it's not just tracking, how many times people are talking about that or what their sentiment is. It's starting to understand context. It's identifying patterns, and we're working on forecasting what those shifts can happen. So that's really, really impacting how we you know, essentially impacting how we transform market research and consumer insights and whatnot. So for example, like AI can actually detect emerging language trends like new slang or evolving phrases, across social media, news, and forums simultaneously. And the traditional methods would likely miss these kinds of shifts or pick them up much later and that sort of thing. Whenever Gen Z comes up with a new phrase, and we have an incoming Gen Alpha and whatnot, there's going to be a lot of slang that we're going to be just kind of confused about. Being able to use AI can help us kind of track those sort of things more effectively. AI also really excels at cross-referencing data, giving a really good multi-dimensional view. And so that really tremendously helps with a lot of the analysis of these different data sources and whatnot. And so it's really helping us move from reactive to proactive, from asking what happened to what's happening now and what's going to happen next. And it's like a cultural radar, essentially. It can help us continuously scan, what's on the horizon.
Love that. And I think it'd be really interesting too to dig into kind of, a bit more about the product and give our listeners a bit of a walkthrough about, how Nichefire actually works and, what makes it different than traditional social listening tools. You got at it a little bit, but I'd love to hear an example of a trend that Nichefire identified before it went mainstream as a bit of a proof in the pudding.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of really great examples. We have a case study with Nestle on how we helped them kind of track GLP-1 weight loss drugs and how that led to a new product innovation that they had. One of my favorite examples actually comes from the food and beverage sector. So we had I can't quite divulge who that customer is right now, but but this is actually an early example that when we started kind of crafting this product. So our platform picked up on emerging trends around spicy food. pick up early signals on spicy and that sort of thing like that. And so there was this rising popularity around spicy flavor infusions in traditionally non-spicy products. So think like chamoy and mango or chili and lime and that sort of thing. And so we started seeing a lot of like Mexican flavor influences, which is kind of cool to see too. So we saw this through a combination of signals, whether it's social media chatter about unique spicy snack pairings, or, there's search interest around spicy condiments, or mentions on food blogs, cooking shows, and forums and whatnot about these new flavor experiments that we started kind of seeing kind of bubble up from that. And so we didn't just catch that people like spicy foods. We were able to identify this broader cultural shifts towards more adventurous eating and flavor experimentation. A lot of it was driven from like that kind of like a Latin American cuisine being, infiltrating kind of more broader culture, similar to how like K-pop, started, kind of driving popularity in many, many other countries. And so you start kind of seeing like spicy, like the sweet and spicy flavor profiles come about, and that sort of thing. And so, one of our clients, they're a major like CPG, confectionery brand, they decided to fast track that development of like a spicy version of one of their classic snacks. So this product, they were able to hit shelves with this spicy flavor, and it really took off and became a bestseller for them. But the key here was that we didn't just like surface the trend after it was already big. We spotted those early signals. I mentioned like chili and lime flavor profiles, mango and chamoy, or tahine used on various fruits like watermelon and whatnot. We started becoming really popular early signals, and we started seeing those bubble up before they really started becoming mainstream. And so that gave our client like a really great head start, allowing them to capitalize on the trend while competitors were still catching up to that. So it's like that ability to see cultural shifts forming in real time, and that helps us, helps set us apart. I particularly like that example because I'm like a big fan of like those spicy flavors and stuff like that too.
You're talking to someone whose partner is Mexican, so I'm very well versed in tahine and like putting these amazing flavors that you wouldn't normally think. So yeah, I'm loving that example too, and as will my partner. Shout out to Monica. Cool. Yeah, appreciate that example. That's a great example, and I think like it's like a playful one too. I think one of our values at LH is professionally playful, and like you'd love to find those little spots where like your product and in all its officialdom can help you and your clients like be playful and connect with audiences and things like that. So. I think that's an awesome example. Talk to me about data a little bit. Like, what types of data sources does Nichefire analyze beyond traditional social media? What are all the inputs that go into helping clients see around corners of cultural shifts?
Yeah, we have to. So we take it a little bit more of like kind of like a thought out approach of like on trying to understand. Can we look at a holistic view of multiple consumer perspectives through our understanding what's happening on the web? And so we like to solve the data that we pull in. We pull in from various sources online. We don't really like sell any scraped data either. We source all of our data from either APIs, data vendors, partners, and stuff like that. And the way we like to look at it is that there's three primary buckets of data that represent consumer perception. You have things like what are they interested in? So we collect data around like search traffic, web traffic. We're able to make estimations around those sort of areas. We're exploring to see if like there's traffic around like what people search for on TikTok and like a ChatGPT and stuff like that to help us understand where is consumer interest lie. What are they searching for? That's like a very clear indicator of potential traction around certain areas. Then we also look at how are people expressing themselves? How are they sharing discourse and spreading their opinions? And so we look at social media platforms like that. So TikTok, we look at X, we look at Reddit, we look at various forms and blogs, Blue Sky, you name it. So our objective is to help you understand like here's the way consumers are expressing themselves, sharing their opinions, and what that looks like. So that's another form of like consumer perception that we look at. And then we also have a third bucket around influence. And so what are influencers saying? What's being said in the news? What are people saying on podcasts and that sort of thing, like podcasts like this, that could potentially influence consumer opinions as well. And so what we do is we kind of built out this engine that looks at those holistically and melts them together to help you understand like a clear pathway for how that narrative is developed over time from all these sources. And so with that, you're able to have this kind of one of a kind engine that helps you, holistically understand how trends have developed over time. And it gives us a really great way to really validate and make profound forecasts and, kind of classify trends that might have been missed if you're looking at one type of data source versus another.
Makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate like the more holistic nature of it, than what you see in some traditional market and audience research. Want to get into, we're a growth strategy agency. We'd be remiss if we didn't ask some questions about growth and how you've grown to the point where you've just secured 2.6 million in funding. Not easy in this funding environment, so hats off to you.
Thank you.
Tell us how because this is what we do. Like we come in, someone raises money and we sit down with them and we're sort of like, okay, we're sort of your fractional CMO. We help you think through how to wisely spend it, because so many folks, they get this funding and they just blow through it, or they don't prepare for a rainy day. They don't invest it strategically in step by step, incremental growth. They're chasing virality, things like that. So this is something we kind of counsel with a lot of folks we work with. I want to understand, how are you planning to adapt your growth strategy, and market segments are you focusing on for growth right now?
Well, for the types of market segments we're focused on, I mean, we primarily sell to enterprise, like large, mid-sized to enterprise level CPGs, retailers, QSRs, and we have a couple other industries, but those are kind of like our primary focus right there. Enterprise sales is art. It's excruciating to get through those procurement cycles and try to get buy-in and whatnot. And also too, I mean, when you have a turbulent market and economy as well too, that can also extend things out and make it more difficult to sell into organizations. And so one of the things that this kind of funding has really helped us do is really invest in sales and marketing and that sort of thing. Really invest our go-to-market, and think strategically about how we approach the whatnot. And so we're really focused on just refining our sales funnel and our strategy for that. What is the best way to build marketing qualified leads at the least cost possible? Like for every dollar spent, can we maximize the amount of dollars we get out of that? And we're just trying to become more predictable in how we forecast those sales efforts and that sort of thing. And so we're investing a lot of time and effort in that sort of strategy. And the other side too is, of course, product. We were technically founded in 2017, but originally under the guise of like a competitive analysis solution. And we did that for a couple of years, and then we weren't getting the traction we wanted. Went back to the drawing board in 2022, and we launched our first like cultural listening platform in 2023. And so we still have a very young product, and there's a lot of work that still needs to be done in order to make sure we're fully mature and ready to scale and service these these big accounts and that sort of thing. And so our objective for this year with this funding has been to can we exceed expectations with the product? Is it something where as soon as you look at it, you're just like, it's able to speak for itself, that sort of thing. Our objective is to get to that point, with these dollars, and then ideally where we want to be at from that is that it's just a matter of, it's just a function of like, invest these dollars in this area and you'll get more money, kind of thing. So that's where we're trying to get to, is like getting to that kind of product market fit, and then figuring out like what lever can we pull to build more growth, essentially.
Yeah, the more, and it's like a bit of a humbling, conversation for me, because like the more I talk to folks, leading, product-led startups, they're talking about this idea of like product as brand. And I was talking to a guy in San Francisco the other day, a tech leader, and he was sort of saying, there's no moat like having a product that clients love. And that's super humbling for folks like us who do marketing and branding, because it's just like, yes, the product is the thing, and you can dress it up however you want, but at the end of the day, it's got to come down to people loving your product. That's the true moat,
Yeah.
and just really appreciating that, and being humbled by that as a marketer, for sure. So
Absolutely.
talk to me about client education, because that's part of what we do, in marketing. How do you explain complex cultural intelligence to potential clients?
That's a great, because that's something we're still kind of figuring out to this day. I mean, you have to think about this too. We're crafting what I would call kind of like a green space product. Cultural listening is kind of like as a new category of insights analytics tools. And so we're still trying to perfect our own approach for how we talk about cultural intelligence and that sort of thing. And one of the best ways to do this is to tell a story about how you've been able to do that with another client, that sort of thing. And Nestle, Kraft Heinz, they're all wonderful case studies, customers that have helped us significantly along the way with crafting the story of Nichefire and helping build what Nichefire is today. And so we talk about those stories, talk about those kinds of use cases. And then, but one of the big things that we like to kind of think about here too is that, we're not here to tell you what are people saying about your brand. We're not here to tell you what are people saying about competitors or hey, there's this hot topic and stuff like that. We're here to help you understand what's going to be around the corner. Understanding these cultural shifts is helping you understand how do you resonate with consumers more effectively with your products, your marketing, and your efforts, and that sort of stuff. And it's all about identifying opportunities. Nobody wants to be the one that missed out on an opportunity, and so you have to think about what does that cost to you to miss out on opportunities. I mean, that was like one of the initial big pain points that we discussed with, a lot of like consumer insights and social intelligence practitioners and whatnot, is that finding those unknown unknowns that lead to big top line gains and stuff like that is very difficult to find. It's because you don't know what you don't know. The way we like to kind of frame this up is that treat Nichefire as like your always on discovery engine. We're here to help you find opportunities that you can take the next step, right? So go and validate it. Then take it to R&D and innovation, and then or take it to your marketing group to kind of think about how do you craft that information. But you say we're that front line of discovery. And so being that front line of discovery helps you stay on top of what's the latest, what are some of those cultural shifts you should be thinking about, helping you think about like what's next, what's next out there. And so that's essentially kind of how we talk about how cultural intelligence should be used.
Yeah, it's tricky. Like when you have such a nuanced product, but also one that like has very clear ROI. I think explaining it can sometimes be tricky, but if the through line is really clear to the ROI, then that makes good sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, the kind of context that we talk about culture is different from like your more demographic like focused culture. Like we're doing more of like helping you understand like the zeitgeist. Helping you understand what are those movements, what are those vibes out there, and that sort of like what's happening there. There's one of the things we want to be able to explore more is that demographic, impact as well. Is, for instance, what are those language barriers? Like, what are those language barriers between somebody that speaks Spanish in Mexico versus Spanish in Spain? Like there's that sort of stuff. Or what are understanding like what are those things that are really important to the Latino community that's based in the U.S. versus the Latino community that's in Mexico or Central America, like stuff like that is, gets into a whole other level of cultural intelligence and context where like that's a nice frontier for us to like to explore and get into as well. And there's a lot of great tools that are doing research in that area too. But when we talk about cultural listening and intelligence, that like we're more focused on those shifts, the momentum and whatnot that's happening with that zeitgeist, those moments that are happening, but also like that kind of slow culture things like sustainability or health and wellness movements and stuff like that. So just kind of like a quick point of clarification there, because the culture is a very broad umbrella, and so like there's different ways in which different solutions can play a role.
Absolutely. And sort of like, especially these days, like it's potentially a sensitive one. You know what I mean? Like, how people absorb cultural understanding and what that's sort of colored by and all that stuff. So I think that's really, really interesting. Talk to me about metrics, like measuring success with your clients. Like what metrics have you found matter most to them?
That's a great question. I mean, that's definitely a case by case basis, right? I mean, trying to think of like a good example. I mean, being able to identify trajectory, and being able to provide measurement towards that, like what's the predicted trajectory, kind of really helps qualify whether or not a new opportunity is something that should be taken seriously. Especially too, like if say there's a new TikTok trend that comes about. A lot of those trends are very ephemeral. They might last a week. They might last a couple months. Some might even be a part of a macro trend that would last a couple years. And our objective is to help you understand at what level is that shift. Is this something that's going to be pretty quick, or is this something that's going to last a while? And through that, understanding those kind of forecasted trajectories, consumer insights professionals can make more profound decisions on, strategic or product initiatives and that sort of thing. Or if you're more on like the corporate comms or marketing side of things, it gives you kind of like, here's a countdown for how long you have to actually leverage something. And so like trajectory has like been a really big measure of success for them with that. And then we even have, and when it comes to more of like the rollout and adoption across the big enterprise, like we have customers that have like hundreds of users, and one of their objectives is to make sure that each of them each of those users in their organization. They're actually accessing the platform and reading the reports that they get and that sort of thing. And so for some more of those admin users, we start to see like, the usability become a really important factor for them to help them understand, like to help them with more of a adoption of this kind of new technology for that too. So those are some of the key metrics that are really important to some of those users.
Makes sense. And yeah, definitely appreciate it. It's different from case to case, and it can be complex. And we tend to build kind of custom dashboards for every single client because it really does vary. So I totally hear that. Wanted to dig into your pathway a little bit more, your career path. It's taken you from marketing roles to founding an AI company that predicts, cultural trends. Walk us through your journey a little bit. Like, was there a moment that you realized there was a gap in the market for predictive cultural intelligence? Like, what was that like?
Well, my background, it started in digital marketing and strategy. I used to be a digital marketing manager, and I used to be the guy that would help vet tools and stuff that you would bring on, your different social listening, analytics, marketing automation tools and stuff like that. I just kind of became obsessed with those analytics capabilities, and I eventually went on to start doing my own consulting to help small and mid-sized businesses do that kind of work, so that way they can see the kind of growth that they want. So doing more strategic consumer behavior work, helping them with digital marketing strategy, website SEO, stuff like that too. That was also around the time where I met my current co-founder, Khalil. Khalil also, and Steven, met him in college, but then he joined us a little bit later. But we initially started Nichefire in 2017 as a competitive analysis solution. And the idea behind that was that a lot of the strategy work that we would do for some of our clients, doing consulting and whatnot, doing some of the competitive analysis work was the most manual and big heavy lift from that. So the original idea was that we'd build an AI that could look at online advertising and social media content from any brand and be able to benchmark it against another brand to help you find white space and opportunities from that. And we did that for a couple of years, and we just didn't find the traction that we wanted to from that. And so we needed to go back to the drawing board. And then one day, this was fast forward to like 2022. One of our original customers, they were a big bank. They came to us and said, "Hey, we use all these social listening tools, but none of them have the capability to identify emerging trends, themes, topics that are relevant to us without us knowing to search for them, or without us having to build a Boolean for them." And so I actually built out this prototype using just like a bunch of old data that we had and Tableau, and just put it all together and presented it to them, and they loved it. And I purchased a pilot for like that week. So from there, we were like, hey, we might be onto something. Let's go and see who else might need this. And we talked to a couple other companies, and literally everyone we talked to said like, hey, this is a big pain point we have too, and this is something that they're interested in. So we started seeing opportunities cascade around this, identifying opportunities and trends and and cultural shifts and that sort of thing like that is was a really big prominent opportunity. And so we started seeing more and more opportunities come up, and we started actually building the first version of the product, and we launched that in December of 2023. And by that time, we were able to bring on some big names, as part of our client book of clients from that too. And here we are to this day. We're still growing our business. I mean, we're just a green startup, still working on our business, but we have a lot of conviction in what we're bringing to the table, and and its impact in the future. So we're really excited about it.
I think that conviction is like so key. I mean, as someone who's been running a company for 5 years, will be 5 years old in June. Like, I think that's often the difference, is just that perseverance and that stick with itness, and separates so many people.
That stick to itiveness, yeah.
Exactly.
One of the things too is that, I mean, technically we started a whole new company back in 2022, but we kept the name because it actually works better with this with this cultural listening solution. And then
Yeah.
one thing that was always nice is that if you have like 3 years of finances, you can you can unlock some SBA funding and stuff like that. And so we bootstrapped our kind of competitive analysis business, and eventually we were like, hey, we need some funds to keep us going. So we were able to get SBA funding and stuff like that too. So yeah, fun little story there. But.
Nice. That's cool. Want to move us into the quick fire round. These are just like, quick, punchy answers to kind of get a flavor for who you are as a person. First one, if you could found another tech startup, what would it be and why?
So because I I could practically live and breathe this space, it would probably be another startup that's somewhat similar. However, one of the things that we've noticed is that there's like the D2C consumer products is actually burgeoning quite a bit, and it's really been accelerated by like TikTok Shop and that just really rapid abilities to like sell and promote through social media and all that sort of stuff too. And one of the things that we would want to be able to do is, or at least I would do, is kind of like shake up the industry trade rag industry, where a lot of the research that CMOs, CIOs, and CEOs of some of these burgeoning consumer product companies are getting is based on like old Oxford research surveys and stuff like that, or what's in the news. But I think there's a really great way to deliver ongoing reporting and whatnot to these sort of executives in a way that helps present to them emerging shifts in pain points, consumption occasions that could matter to them a lot. So helping use more data sources to rapidly report to them and give it to them at like 15, $20 a month, something like that. So that's something I would, I've been thinking about too, is like, what would I do if I didn't have Nichefire? That's something
Yeah.
else.
Super interesting. I mean, one thing we're working on with a partner is like having sort of more rapid cycles of like user experience research and, audience research and market research, and then folding that into content development. And you'd be probably interested in this as a former digital marketer, but folding that into like web optimization. And so just like really tightly integrating feedback cycles from clients into content and sort of go to market stuff. So and that's happening a lot with marketing automation, but there's some other bits there as well. So really interesting. What about a tech invention that makes you the most excited? What's got you most excited these days in tech?
Man, there's a lot. I actually been really excited about like some of the deep research capabilities and some of the AI tools. Like I remember early days trying to do like detailed market research to kind of understand and quantify some of the things we're seeing in the market to kind of help prove out the case behind Nichefire. And in 10 minutes, like a deep research can conduct like a detailed business plan or detailed market research report for you based on everything it finds on the web, which is like super impressive. So that's one thing that makes me really excited. We've actually been leveraging that to kind of help us understand more about how we can kind of qualify sales opportunities and kind of think about like what are some emerging shifts that we should be in the landscape that we should be thinking about for our own business as well. So those are some really cool capabilities that we've been quite excited about.
That's really cool. And then flip side of that question, what's some tech that makes you the most concerned right now?
So there's a lot of technology around like leveraging your own personal data and like images and stuff like yourself to recreate imagery and whatnot. Like for instance, there's been a couple trends around like using your own headshots to create a profile picture of you as like an action figure in the plastic blistered packaging and stuff like that. I always feel a little wary about those kinds of solutions because what are they going to do with with their image, with your image profile and that sort of thing. I mean, there's been a lot of concern like with social media platforms having access to all the image data and stuff like that too. And how are they going to use that and what sort of things. So some of that stuff kind of makes me concerned because I mean that could be there could be an opportunity for somebody to use that information pretty nefariously, especially like with voiceovers and that sort of thing too. So that stuff kind of makes me a little concerned. And I think about that in a more macro level of like, how could that potentially impact politics or elections or, stuff like that too. I mean, like that stuff kind of gets me a little wary.
Yeah. Keeps you up at night. Yeah. There's the implications for this stuff is, yeah, some of the deep fake stuff, the videos, it's like, wow, this is, yeah, it's just a matter of when, not if. So. Who is a literal human who's been integral to your career path that you'd like to shout out?
hmm Well, I always want to shout out my wife because she's been putting up with me for a while. But my two partners, Steve and Khalil, I mean, I would absolutely not be anywhere near where I am today without having just the world's best partners and co-founders with me. I mean, you hear some crazy stories about co-founder spats and stuff like that in startups, but I've been working together. I've been working with Steven and Khalil for nearly 10 years now, and we've gone through a lot. But honestly, I couldn't ask for any better co-founders to work with me through this crazy journey as well. So big shout out to Steve and Khalil. They're awesome.
Nice. And what's an inspirational quote that stuck with you through your journey in tech?
Oh man, I haven't had a chance to think about a quote. You might have to give me a minute on that one. I'm sorry. I'm just trying.
It's okay. Yeah,
I just have like
they're not meant to be gotcha question. No, no worries. Take your time. It can also be like a resource or a book or like some kind of, anything.
yeah. Well, I mean, there's a ton of books. There's a ton of books I've been reading lately, and one I've been reading lately too has been this one called the 15 it's called like what was it 15 commitments of conscious leadership. If you're an executive or if you're somebody that's trying to get a better grasp on how to be a better leader, how to be a better a more conscious leader, that is a wonderful book to check out for that.
What's it called? The 15 Laws of Conscious Leadership?
Or the 15 commitments of conscious leadership.
I like that.
That one's a great one. And then of course there's the classic, how to win friends and influence people. That one's always like a classic one that's always in the back of my mind. And then some more industry specific ones that I particularly like. There's one called Hit Makers that's really
Yes.
interesting. Contagious by Jonah, and then another one, Everybody Lies. That's one of my favorite ones. That one has some like a little bit of outdated methodology in that too, but a lot of the case studies and stories in it are very fascinating and fun.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a really good book out there called Mistakes Were Made, but Not by Me, which kind of goes to I think it's like Carol Tavris and Elliot Aronson. But yeah, it's kind of like why people justify different things, and especially I think it's especially timely now in the era of like misinformation and disinformation, all that stuff, and kind of like people believing all different types of stuff. So
Hmm.
really interesting. Well, cool. Well, Michael, I really appreciate your time today. I'd love this episode because I think Nichefire represents, how AI can help us not just understand what's happening now, but kind of anticipate what's coming next and these cultural shifts. I think it's really fascinating to see how technology can help bridge the gap between brands and communities. It's something that we work on at Literal Humans, and really try to provide, deeper insights into what people truly care about. I think that's when like marketing and growth strategy is at its best, when it's like, catering to that stuff, not like trying to manufacture, consent and manufacture demand. So I really appreciate you jumping on the pod. And where can listeners find out more about the good work you're doing at Nichefire?
Yeah, well, for one, you could always head up our website, nichefire.com, NICHEFIRE.com. And you can always check us out on LinkedIn. Just type in Nichefire and find us there. You're welcome to reach out to me if you have any questions as well. My email is mhoward@nichefire.com. But we would love to hear from you and hear any of your questions.
Nice. Thank you. We'll include all that in the episode description. And for folks listening, please leave a review, give us a 5-star rating. It helps us bring great guests like Michael Howard, CEO of Nichefire, onto the show, talk about cultural listening for brands. So thank you again so much, Michael, for your time.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, have a good one.
Take care.